everyone. Welcome to an awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm here with Calvin Mosiman. Hi, Calvin. How are you?
Good afternoon. Doing great.
I want to welcome everyone to fmtrain.tv, where every day is awesome. Well, every business day, Monday through Friday, is awesome FileMaker training. So welcome to our channel right here, the fmtrain.tv channel. So crazy week of activity, last couple, 2-3 weeks for me, been busy. Today we're going to be doing pivot tables with Calvin, pretty exciting. And then Nick Hunter is going to pick up the conversation for a couple days. And Friday, kind of our ongoing open Q&A day. I will be there without any, without a net. Jacob Taylor is on vacation this week. So for those of you who want to light your server on fire, run an update you shouldn't run, press a button you shouldn't press, I would recommend holding off this week if you want to get your server back in a timely fashion, right? Well, Calvin, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
So here is, I've got a few sample files for us to look at.
Are these things that we've already given away? Because people are going to instantly bombard me with this, right?
These are things that we have given away a couple of years ago. But I have a zip file here we can send with all three of them packaged together. We are talking today about virtual lists and pivot tables. The first demo that I'm going to show you is we kind of look at what is a virtual list and how can that be used as a pivot table. The second demo is a look at a sample implementation, not one that I built, but one where we implemented a pivot table in FM Starting Point. And in this particular case, we are using XQSQL to build the data in the pivot table. And then the final demo is collecting a similar data, but instead of using XQSQL, we're using finds. So you can kind of we'll be able to see all of those different methods and get a look at those items. Okay, so let's open up our first one. And so first off, what is sometimes you'll find in an app, there's a table called a virtual list. What is a virtual list and how do we use it? So a virtual list is usually, it's just a table that has a lot of records that we can keep that don't really store data. They are used to display data. And so in this case, I've got 105 records. And we can use those to display. First, I selected the staff button. Now we're seeing staff data. I'll select states. Now we're seeing states data. I'll select types. Now we're seeing type data. And if we go into layout mode, we'll see that this table is called virtual list. And we just have two fields that are repetitions. One's called, both called columns. Let's go back to browse mode. So depending on what happens with each of these buttons, we're displaying different data. Now I've got this button that says view data. I can pop this open and we'll see, okay, so this is the data that we're viewing, Colleen, Jerry, Ryan. Select states, view data. Now it says California, Florida, New York. Now if I go over here and change this data, I can say Tom, Dick, and Harry. Close it. You'll notice that what's being displayed changed. So what's great for this is the reason why using a virtual list and a pivot table is really great is because we can take data from FileMaker and display it in ways that aren't really easy to do with FileMaker in the way that it's normally the data is normally stored. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here with each of these buttons. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go select one of these, and all that we're doing here, let's just pop this open in a script. We have a script parameter, so each of these buttons calls the same script, and we are just setting that field data with the value list items based on a hard-coded value list name. So we're putting those values in the data field, and then we're performing a find to find all records that have values in them. So let's look at this find real quick. We're just looking at columns. If there's a value, display it. If there's not, don't display it. And I'll go ahead and say save. So we put the data in the field, in the data field, then perform this find, and we see our found set is 3 or 2. So let's go ahead and look at the fields behind the virtual list. Make this a little shorter. Okay, so here we have a row number. This is an auto-enter serial number, so we're up at 107. And this is pretty important to, we're using a number is instead of a, it's not an ID, it's actually a row number. And we use that to grab the data for the columns. Let's open up the columns. Now this is an unstored calculation. Data, we're looking at the column number, the row number, and then we're grabbing the value that we want from the list of data and just displaying that in the column itself. And then we'll look at data real quick. This is just a global text field. And so that means 2 people could be working on the same app if it's hosted. If the app's hosted, 2 people can be working on the same app and you looking at the same table and see completely different data in the virtual list, in this list. So before I go to the next part where this is kind of covered the basics of how the data is put in a field and then displayed. Before we jump into seeing what we can do to build some reports and use this virtual list as a pivot table, do we have any questions about the virtual list before we transition to the pivot table demonstration? No questions. We will keep moving. We have this other button called Generate Report, and we have a number of different reports to generate. And so sales stats by year. Now, just to look at what we're doing here in the tables, I've only got 2 tables. The virtual list, there's no data stored there. It's just for displaying data. The second is T12 invoices. These field names are identical to the field names in FM Starting Point. So theoretically, it should be pretty easy to just copy the virtual list features in here and just paste them right in FM Starting Point if any of these reports look interesting. But if we go to the invoices, I'll just show you that we have an invoice ID, a state, a staff name, an invoice type, a date, and then a total amount for each one. That's all the data that's in that table. So now I'm going to say sales stats by year. And now I've got this nice report. Now you'll notice that here we're in a list view, and I'm getting each row is a year, 2019, 2000, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And we've got totals for each month. In each month is a column. And then we have a grand total column. This is a pretty standard looking report, but to build this in FileMaker is a little tricky. So if we go to view data, let's go ahead and see what the data looks like here. If we select view data, we'll notice here that we have the year, and then we have a comma, and then a dollar or a number, comma, number. So we've got this comma separated list. Each row is separated by a return, and each column or each data point is separated by a comma. And so it's really easy to just kind of look at this and see what's going on, and then see how we can translate that into these columns in this report. So let's go ahead and look under the hood and see how this is done. I'll go into layout mode, and you'll see. So our first the fields that we're seeing here is columns. And it's just a repeating field that goes all the way up to, allows for 14 columns. You could have any number of columns. And then we have a summary. If we go to the summary, it is a summary field, a total number of columns, and it has repetitions that match the number of column repetitions. So each column repetition is summarized. Let's go back to browse mode. And I can go into preview mode, and this would make a nice report to print out if somebody wanted to print this.
David says, David Angel just posted, hey, if I'm working on a record one that gets its value from a virtual list and someone else wants to write to the same record with their own virtual list, what will happen?
Yeah, great question. So we just talked a second ago about two people can be doing this at the same time and it won't interrupt each person. And that's really an awesome part about it. So how does that work?
Is it variables? Are you writing this in the variables?
No, I'm using globals. Global fields.
Okay, well there's your answer, David, right? Global fields are session-based, they're individual to you, right?
Yeah, so the data that we're displaying here is saved in this field called data. And because it's a global, then the person who's currently working in that session will only see.
We ran a test on this the other day. Let me bring this up real quick. We did a test the other day on this. It's one of those sort of things. I was playing with the commit records. I was training like 3 or 4 or 5 new people at RCC. We're having some juniors have left, and we're some new juniors. We have actually much better junior team that's coming on board, and they and actually writing to the global field. Like if you click in the field and edit, the global does not lock the record on the server. And it's one of those kind of things that it's individual, but actually watching the record lock or not lock, it doesn't cause a lock. So if you're writing in and out of variables or writing in and out of a global field, it will not cause a lock to occur. That's where you lock the record where someone else couldn't get to it, right? So we did this very specifically the other day, and I was like, I kind of thought that was the case, but unless you've actually really done it, it's like, I think I can fly a hot air balloon upside down over by the tower, inverted flyby. But unless you try it, you're really not sure you can do it, right? So it's one of those kind of things you have to try to make sure you can do that.
Okay, so here's the, so what's going on here is we are running a script that grabs this data through finds and loops and puts it into this data field. And then in that calculation that I showed you for the columns, the repeating columns field pulls out the calculations, uses the calculation to pull out the data points and put it in this nice graph here that we can print and kind of get a summary of what's going on. So what's cool about this, we'll go ahead and look at the script. But one of the cool things is that because we're not limited to one form of report. So here you will notice we get into loops within loops. So it gets a little complicated here. But we're performing finds first for the year, and then each month within the year, and then that's the end of the loop. And the more complicated the report, the more complicated the script gets. So let's go ahead and back to, so we just saw this report by year. Let's look at something else. How about a report by state? Now you'll notice here that the virtual list month, you'll notice, and we changed the report, but our layout didn't change. So here now we're seeing each year and the state. So you can look at your sales by state, look at them by year, and we're still getting the same columns. It's still putting the data into the same data field, and we're still parsing it out the same way, but we're giving it different data to, and this is a little more granular, so you can see the differences for each, across the board for each state. Let's grab the next one. So here now it's similar to the state one, but in this case we're looking for each staff person and their sales for the year, and seeing how they've done as far as that would go. But the format's pretty similar to the state.
But if two people are working with globals and one saves the changes to the table, the other guy is working with old data, right? Question mark.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. I think.
But if two people
Mhm.
But this popped up just a second ago. But if two people are working with globals and one saves the changes to the table, the other guy will be working with old data, right? So if you, I think
Yeah.
we're saying if both people generate virtual lists, then someone munges the back end data that generated the virtual list. Virtual list you're on could be out of date. I guess is that. I mean, technically,
It
yes.
technically it
Is that a
could
really?
be. I'm not sure how soon we would need that. Most of the people they're looking for reports. They're looking for not a report based on the current moment. Tonight I have to run a report that takes about 5 hours to run, and this report is for the month of September because it just passed, and we're now 11 days into, but the data is not going to change for September because it's been over for 11 days, but now we're just finally ready to run the report.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot of times, people don't see that latest data and it's happening. But if you're generating it on the fly on an as needed basis, yeah, I mean, listen, as we get farther along with the FileMaker platform, right? And David and Ruben are talking about this, but as you go along farther with the FileMaker platform, you start to optimize. Press the button right here. As you get from here into here, you start to optimize your solution for performance, which means that you have to do some things that are kind of calculated cache saved values because generating them on the fly is too big of a performance hit, right? And so if you have a virtual list that has to be up to date to the latest millisecond, then you're going to have some challenges with that, right? Because you're always be refreshing it, right? Oh, maybe a robot that updates it every 5 minutes or 60 seconds or 1 hour, right? I mean, I have a lot of reports that refresh either on a Saturday early in the Sunday early in the morning on a weekend or in the middle of the night. And then the data during the day I have is somewhat cached, but it'll be refreshed every 24 hours or something, right? Because do I actually at RCC need the latest data on XYZ statistic? Because if you want it instantaneous and immediately up to date, even Amazon, if we talk about the way Amazon and these non-SQL really non-transactional SQL or non-SQL data systems work is that they are what they call eventually consistent, which means that the data you might have is not consistent. It's one of the hardest things dealing with Mongo we've been learning, right? That we save data, the data is committed and change the server, then everyone gets a refresh. Well, with those systems, they're eventually consistent. Not even up to the developer. It's whoever controls the clustering of the server and how those servers update each other, right? So the bigger the data system is, the less likely you're going to have instantaneously up-to-date data. Okay, so I'm kind of beating that topic, but it's kind of a strategic thought, right? It really is, right? How up to date do you? I mean, like if you're launching the space shuttle or the rocket or the Artemis rocket, whatever. If you're launching a rocket, then you want real telemetry, real time, right? But with like Amazon, you go to buy something on Amazon, it says, hey, there's 5 of these available and maybe those 5 are not available and they haven't been available for 15 minutes, but your system hasn't updated yet. And then you put the order in even, and you give them money even, and then you get this email back saying, hey, our bad, this record data where it said 5 was available is actually not true, wasn't accurate. We don't have any to sell you, we're going to refund your money. It's a legit problem. Okay, cool. David Ames says you import a single field global for each record, the other fields in the record gets the content from a parser in the global field. When you quit FileMaker, the virtual list goes in the trash. Yeah, because it's all saved in session. It's what we call session data. So when your FileMaker crashes or you quit it on purpose, whatever happens first, or you close the file, any uncommitted data is saved that should be saved, and any session data, global variables, global field values, gone. Okay, so cool. I beat that horse to death. All right, you may continue, Calvin. Sorry.
Yeah, and the purpose of the pivot table and the virtual list is not to save the data; it's to display it. So as soon as I close this, well, in this case, because it's local, it's going to save the data. But if it's hosted, it would just be cleared out.
Well, you could write it out. You could write it out to a table that's designed this way. You could absolutely.
Yeah, you could.
and then that would be cached, so people wouldn't have to have it. So he's done this in a value list, but you could actually save this to a dedicated table with these columns, these fields here, and these records, and then write the data in there. And then, yeah, I mean, a pivot table doesn't say it has to be transitory in nature,
True.
right? It could be a pivot table that's saved forevermore, right? So
it could be. Yep.
it's
So
not a pivot table, not a pivot variable table. It's a pivot,
right?
just a turn of the columns, right? So,
Yeah.
all right,
So
cool.
in this case, we're using the global field, but obviously it could be built without it. So the last demo here is that we can show by quarter. So here we are instead of using columns that were represented the month, we have columns representing each quarter of the year. And so you'll see that we've used this different data to show different using the same table to show the same data in different ways in different formats. So you can create any number of these reports that would be helpful for you. So so that's kind of this overview of how this is working in this demo file. Next, I'd like to pull up a demo where this is built into FM starting point. So, and just to remind everybody here, we are putting this data into a global field that's comma separated. Now let's go ahead and open up. So the next demo is this, we have the, so this is FM starting point. It's based on the same table as the first demo I showed, the invoices table. But here we can see a list of invoices, and then we can start manipulating the data here at the bottom. Now, what this is doing, instead of showing us dollar totals, though, is it is showing us total orders. And another cool thing about this demo is that you can change what is displayed in the columns and in the rows. So we'll see in this case, we're looking per project. So we've got each row is a project, and we can see how many orders for each project there was each month. We can change that by account. Obviously, each project is probably only associated with one account. We already looked at month. A project and project doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you can see project and status. So each project has two open. These have two active invoices, one void invoice, and then 0 canceled. So it gives you a lot of flexibility here to change those columns and rows to whatever the user wants to, however the user wants to view the data. In this case, it is using XQSQL, and and this is hidden underneath there we go. So it's using XQSQL to generate those totals, and it's not grabbing the total amount. It's just grabbing the count for each of these. But because it's running locally,
so let's talk about this real quick. We're going to talk about this real quick. So once again, this SQL thing, it came up 10 minutes ago. I didn't even know it was in this demo. So can you articulate? So let me just state some facts up here for everyone. SQL, FileMaker doesn't fundamentally talk SQL. It's like if you went to college or you went to high school and you learned a foreign language, or if you're overseas, whatever they call your more advanced finishing schools, you learn another language, okay? FileMaker didn't even know how to even talk to SQL until probably 7 or 8 years ago. So in the course of its lifetime, over 35 years of FileMaker being in existence, the last 7 or 8 years, 9 years, whatever it's been, it could talk SQL in a limited amount of SQL, not everything. And so understand that it has to translate into SQL, and then the results come back out of SQL. It has to translate in and out for you, which adds overhead. So it generally won't necessarily be as fast for most operations. However, it does appear to be faster in some situations, but mainly, what is the main benefit to why you would run a write SQL, Kelvin? Right.
So usually when I do it, it's just one, it has to work fast when you're using it in a practical application, and two, usually it's faster to write something in SQL than to build the architecture that would need to be used to accomplish the same thing with a regular script.
Okay, yeah, and that was nicely to say that if you could write it with a regular script, but a lot of people would do it through relational dependencies, which means you have to build additional relationships on the graph. So just pop that open real quick. We'll just jump in there. So if you yeah, in this thing area, and then scroll down a little bit. If we were going to do some SQL action, or not doing SQL, but we're doing a script through relationships, you would end up having to build additional infrastructure over here, right? You understand what we're saying? And so by doing it with SQL, you can, that's in the SQL statement, you could say construct a temporary relationship, right, to this point on the other side, get this data. Then as soon as that SQL statement is done, that theoretical temporary bridge that you created between those two spots is blown up and goes away. So it allows you to create ad hoc on demand schema, which otherwise this is what Nick will show you on Monday, that he got rid of SQL and it's just as fast. It is 10 times faster, whatever. Nick will start pounding his chest of how great he is, which he is great. I'm not saying he's not, but is that in order for him to do that, he has to build a bunch of relationships in here. So if you know SQL, you want to do something real quick where you're collecting data across multiple tables, and you don't want to build the infrastructure, i.e. build the TOs and all the little anchor buoys and things in here, then you could do it with the SQL statement. If you already know SQL, Stu, Dimok, Ruben, all the people here who know SQL. Yeah, so that's the idea. So what Calvin did and this was built by a guy who originally built this and was quite good at SQL, right? He was a very talented, probably one of the most talented people I ever met. So very interesting. All right, so yeah, so that's how that works. I just want to point that out, that that's the main benefits. You don't have to build the relational structure to support what the SQL statement can do on its own, right?
No, good commentary there. So the next thing I'd like to look at in the data is in the data viewer. So in this case, the data is not so in the first case, we saved everything in a global field. In this case, everything is in a global variables, and you'll see that we have a row totals, and we've got row labels. So we're using multiple global variables to generate this this data, which takes you have to track each of those things. It's not quite as simple as the first one that I showed. And one thing to point out here, I did want to show, is that in the data viewer, you'll notice that each of these, we're separating the data by using different variables. In the first demo, I had all the data in one field, and the calculation parsed it out. In this demo, we are using a variable for each column or each row that shows that it parses out of. So the way that it's differentiating is from different variables themselves. Now, in this last demo that we have, we're accomplishing the same thing as previous. So let's do a count over here in month up here. So we're accomplishing the same thing as far as being able to select different items to be the rows, different items to be the columns. But we're not using execute SQL. So it's a little easier for somebody with regular FileMaker background to follow. And second, we're saving everything in a JSON object, which makes it easier to find where everything exists. And
I got schooled on JSON about 3 or 4 or 5 days ago, or maybe that was Friday or whatever that was. That was crazy. There is a question here, and I don't know if we have any European people here. So here's the question. It's from Ruben. It's a good question. It's about localization. Question: in Europe, we have commas as a number separator. So if you have 583 euros and 23 cents, or whatever the hell you call your pennies over there, they put a comma in there instead of a period. Is the comma as separator in a virtual list mandatory, or can we use a semicolon or colon or something else in the virtual list?
Yeah, so this virtual list is just working as a it's just a, let's go ahead and look at the field itself. And it's called pivot table. And I think it's just called row. So this is an unstored calculation, but because it's referencing the global data, then it's not as much of overhead as, and it has to be unstored. And we are pulling the data from the JSON global, but the result is a number. So any formatting that we want to apply to this field, all of our formatting options for numbers is available. So if I go over here and I say, instead of, you could just say we want to use
System
the
settings, right? Yeah.
system settings, and that's
Yeah,
going to
it's
update
localized.
it. Since I'm not localized, I'm going to say my decimal is a comma, and my 1,000 separate. What do you use for 1,000 separator?
I don't know. He uses a
Oh,
dot.
it's just reversed.
It's reversed. Yeah. Okay.
So this, let me go ahead and just grab all of these and say, for the decimal, I want a comma.
Yeah.
And for the 1,000 separator, I want a point. So now, because
I wonder I can't read any of your stuff.
So now we'll see. We don't have any.
It screwed that up somehow. Did it not take that?
It didn't take the 1,000 separator. Let's see what's going on here. Maybe we didn't enable it. I'm just going to grab all these rows. And, I have to enable
some of them are not that
separator.
way. Try that. I could try again, browse to see what happens.
Okay.
Oh,
so
yeah. If I saw that, I would cause my little head to explode. So that's that's not $5 and 1,094 cents. It's 5,194.90, I guess, euros. Or hey, Ruben, where are you at? Ruben, are you Germany? Or you Netherlands? Where are you at? Are you so you're using Netherlands? So are you using what you're using FileMaker? So when you buy FileMaker or purchase or download, it comes with like the 6 or 7 or 8 languages built in: Chinese, Japanese, English, obviously. It's going to come with German, French, Italian, and Dutch, I think. Right. So, and Dutch. Yes. You guys are having it localized for Dutch, correct? Yeah, apparently there was some big snafu. I don't know. You guys probably heard about this yet. I just mentioned this. That there's a company, for those of you wondering about this, I'm just going to do this real quick. It's a company called Winsoft, and they do the localization for FileMaker into languages that are other than those like 7. And so like if you want the Russian version or the Hebrew version so they do this additional localization, right? Beeswax. There it is. Winsoft International. Central European with English menus: Polish, Russian, Turkish. Middle Eastern, I guess, would be Arabic, Indian, Thai, North African, French. Okay. Interesting, right? Really, really interesting. So what else? Anything else, Calvin? What else we got?
Yeah, so if we take a look, so just to recap on that, you can either not hard code, but change the number settings to your whatever location you're at, or you can just select the system settings and it will do it by default. So one thing that I wanted to show here is that in this case, we are saving everything into a JSON object. So that means we only have one variable that is being used for the one variable where that data is being stored, as opposed to multiple variables and trying to figure out where something is saved. Everything's just put in one variable, and you can reference it right here and kind of see what's going on. And then if we want to see it a little, parse it out into something a little more legible, you can say JSON format elements and then grab the global JSON. And now we can kind of see what this looks like parsed out.
I
And
was learning about JSON the other day. I had to do it, and all of you were like suffering through with me, watching me trying to do JSON with base elements in the. That was last Friday, the SQL signature thing on the new studio. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Calvin was there too. You were there?
I don't think so.
Not on that one.
Jacob probably was.
Yeah. Yeah, you were. No, it was me and David, or me and Jacob Taylor was suffering through
Yeah.
it. But yeah, cool. Well, that's pretty neat stuff. Iger Dave said, "Oh my gosh, it's 2022, and we're still talking about fresh data since like the 1980s." You know, what's funny about that is that you would think that that would go away, but the data systems have gotten bigger. Like back in the 80s, you couldn't have everyone on the. I mean, assuming the internet existed back in the 80s, which it didn't, but assuming the internet was everywhere back in the 80s, there weren't database systems that could handle, for example, like Amazon, right? So if you're thinking about like Amazon doing all these orders and all this stuff worldwide, they had to build a new database system, a new kind of relational database engine that's technically not relational, and it's just what we call eventually consistent. And so it's so big that there cannot at any one time really be a total single source of truth, right? That this is the idea of the business, right? Business processes where like Sally has post-it notes, right? And then Richard has this book with little tabs on it with some important information there. And so has this and that. And then we have some other post-it notes over here. And then there's an Excel spreadsheet. And if you take all those little bits together, you have the true facts that run your business. So people say we need a single source of truth, i.e., a single location, even if it's a single post-it note, where all the facts are in one place. It's a single source. So most times people talk about that with the database. And Iger Dave has a really great comment. It's the year 2022, and we're having this conversation about that we're still trying to talk about how fresh is the data and is that a concern? And we could, with the technology that we have, relational databases can't scale big enough to run Amazon. They have to be, I would say, loosely coupled, not super tight. Like when you lock a record, it's kind of locked, and and kind of not locked across the entire organization. So if Richard Carlton was in Africa and Richard Carlton's in California and we both log in at one time, I'm assuming the security is a single source. But once you get past that, both of us could put an order in and not even know about the other person's order, even though we're the same person, right? Because the servers on the other side of the world eventually will synchronize with the servers on this side of the world, clustering and that replication stuff, right? And so, yeah, here we are. The year is 2022. Instead of having single source of truth everywhere and not having a business that's functional, we decided that the single source of truth was somewhat negotiable as long as Amazon could take orders everywhere in real time and there wasn't any sort of delay. Makes sense? In the future, we have self-driving flying cars, okay? They don't even have really legal cars that are driving themselves yet because they keep running people down and killing them or killing the occupants of the car. And everyone's like, all these companies are doing the same thing. We're going to have a self-flying taxi. Okay. You think driving a car is bad? Wait till they have a self-flying taxi and it son of augers into some family's house, kills the kids, kills the parents, kills the people in the taxi. Okay. How long is that business going to be going? Right. I can tell you as a professional pilot, that's a real thing. That's a real thing. So yeah, the future is going to be amazing. The future is never quite what you think it's going to be, right? And that's why we get to hang out together and grow together and learn about this stuff, right? Yeah, the whole idea of a single source of truth of data, and you talk to customers and deal with people and try to set expectations with the people that you work with, whether you work for the company or you're a contractor or whatever, managing their expectations is big, and them understanding where the truth of data is, or maybe it's disseparated, right? Because it's worldwide, right? Those are all big things. All right, cool. Other bits about this. I was just going to point out, Iger Dave, really good comment, but it's you realize that there were other forces at play, like if they had a single relational database, you couldn't run Amazon the way it's run, right? So then they decided that making money, making billions, if not trillions of dollars, was more important than having the orders be entirely perfectly accurate, because they create a process on the back end to clean up any crack, where the data hits, right? You have 100 products in the warehouse, then you're down to 5 left, and you have 8 orders worldwide for those 5 products. Amazon would rather sell through all those products and send 3 people refunds and apologize, give them a 5 or 10% discount on their next order or something. It's like overbooking airline seats. If you have 200 seats on an airline, I guarantee the airline has sold 220 of those seats, or whatever the number is. And then you get 210 people show up and it gets ugly, okay? But that's the way airlines work. They're very low margin. Frequently, they want to stuff those planes full. So it's exactly the same thing, right? So you oversell it, then you clean up the mess on the backside. And of course, you run the risk of pissing people off. I'm not a big fan of that, deliberately making people mad, especially on an airline, because it's such a stressful thing for most people, unless you're already been drinking before you get to the plane, like some people here. So anyway, reminder, topics. If you have topics for the live streams, you want to see us talk about something in FileMaker, or maybe peripheral to business about, selling software, getting the word out there, let us know. Send us an email to support. It doesn't have to be a well thought out email. If we can do it, we will do it. Every once in a while, someone sends us email. Can you show us how to do inventory reconciliation between BigCommerce and Shopify? And if we haven't done it before, then probably it's not something we're going to be able to present on. But a lot of times Calvin comes up. Hey, Calvin, you been working on the SMS ARC with anyone? Right? Is that ever going to happen?
It's going to happen, but we're still trying to get their things set up.
Okay. So yeah, that's another one. We're trying to come up with a two-way SMS kit. We call it the ARC for application something, or but basically it's where you can integrate SMS messaging into your existing FileMaker solution, drag and drop. And so you can remind customers there's a meeting, and then they can say, oh yeah, confirm that or cancel that or whatever kind of stuff that your dentist and doctor do. But wouldn't it be great if you had like a calendar kit add-on, you drag it in there, you configure a couple things and it works. Yeah, it's called the SMS ARC. Cool.
There's an automated response kit.
Automated response kit. Yeah. So yeah, we could also build our own little a robotic SMS. Claris. When you text Claris, you could actually have her own. That's what I want to do, is set up her own text number where you can text her, and then she can use limited artificial intelligence to try to answer your question about why FileMaker is the way it is. Right. All right, cool. That's it for today, everyone. Appreciate it. Make sure you got the sample file. If you have questions, comments, send to support RC Consulting. We appreciate the support. Calvin, good job as always. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!